And what we do is we're able to actually look at the social media footprint of sponsorships in real time, at scale, without having to look at any of the text associated with these posts. And what we found is really quite striking. So if you're a rights holder or a team, then we've been able to show that in most cases, the exposure that's being attained on social is nearly equivalent, sometimes more than television. Television is definitely not dead. I would say that there's still, in many ways, more sponsorship value to be extracted from that medium. At the same time, there's been a dramatic undervaluation of the exposure that social is providing. Effectively, if you can't really track it, objectively and prove it, then it doesn't really exist. And now that we are introducing this capability to teams, it's having dramatic effects on the story, on rates, and also on how they sort of think about social generally.
You know, from my previous time at Heineken, we were working with AWEurope and their broadcasters, and actually we learned, I think it was over 95% of people still wanted to watch the game live and on TV. Where I think digital plays a bigger role is in extending that conversation and extending that moment, giving them the behind the scenes access, giving them the inside story. But I mean, me as a viewer as well, I still think are crying out for live sport. That's why people don't mind taping EastEnders, but not many people like to tape live sport and watch it 2 hours later. You know, chances are they're going to find out the score.
So are you saying that live sports will never be disrupted the way that other TV shows are being disrupted by the likes of Netflix, other OTT players?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what will happen, however, is the way in which rights holders and brands take the content they get from those broadcasters and distribute them amongst their own social media channels. That will change, and hopefully for the better. But ultimately, the live experience is still king.
It's about also understanding what the partner is valuing, and what their objectives are going to be over the association. And that's something that, again, we invest a lot of time in, is actually understanding the direction of their business and what we need to achieve. And if it's about reach and those big numbers, then fine. But actually, we've got the ability with our global database to build in. You know, we can assess segment after segment after segment to make sure that you may be hitting a much smaller number, but a much smaller number that is ultimately far more relevant to your business.
And it's not just always about reach. I guess sometimes it's also simply about awareness. It's about loyalty. And how do you measure that? Because this is such a soft factor. I guess your program can't really account for that, can it?
So again, what we do is it's objective third party, right? So we have a mechanism for basically looking at every single exposure. So let's say, you know, some sort of jersey sponsorship is on screen for 14 seconds. We won't only look at the time it's in view, but also what's the size of it relative to the size of the screen? Is it blurry? Is it obfuscated in any which way? What's the share of voice? Are there 4 other sort of sponsorships in that same frame, or is it there alone? And we use that to effectively generate what we call an MVP, a media value percentage, which is multiplied by what it would cost to own if it was television, a 30-second ad spot, and discounted, and that's how you arrive at a value. Again, that's a transparent sort of agreed upon way to calculate that value. As far as the brands then ingesting that data and determining if they are getting the required ROI, that's entirely up to the brands. What we're just trying to do is show them that they have achieved this much exposure in monetary value terms. And it's a much larger conversation around whether or not that they're achieving this sort of brand objectives.
Well, you're absolutely right. Content for us is absolutely paramount. We retain a flexible approach. So, first up, none of our content sits behind a paywall, as would typically be the case at other clubs. And that's something that we truly believe in and is directing our path forward. We also retain the right to go where the conversation is, so we're not rigid about all of that content needing to sit on our own platforms and our own website. So we're open to syndicating content out around the world. We recognise the changing nature of fan behaviour, so we go where the conversation is live. And in terms of authenticity, we're looking. We're always looking, fans get distracted very quickly. We're looking for opportunities to capture them, to bring them real stories, particularly of our fans around the world. So